Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. Always nice to have you with us. And we've got a really fun show, an interesting show, an informative program for you. We've got two great guests, so let's meet them right now. We have Nick Dembowski. Everybody knows Nick. He's the president of the Kingsbridge Historical Society. Nice to have you with us, Nick.
Thanks, Gary.
And one of my buddies in the Bronx, everybody's my buddy in the Bronx, Stephanie Coggins, who's a board member of the Kingsbridge Historical Society. Also, I don't know what they call it, the proprietor or the maker.
Administrator.
The administrator, okay, of the Riverdale, Spuyten Duyvil, Kingsbridge Inwood Views Facebook page, and also the Bronx City Council District 11 Voter Forum. And she does a great job with that. So, Stephanie, we're going to put you on hold because Nick has got some exciting stuff to tell us about. Nick, nice to see you. First of all, just to let us know where you are so people would say, wow, look at that fun stuff. There's a pipe organ behind it.
Yeah. So I'm in a landmark building right now. It was landmarked as Edge Hill Church of Spuyten Duyvil. It was built in 1888 for the foundry workers that worked in the Johnson Foundry, which was a giant industrial facility on the Spuyten Duyvil Creek here in the Northwest Bronx. And this is the neighborhood of Spuyten Duyvil. We're the Kingsbridge Historical Society because if you go way back to the times of the American Revolution, which we're about to talk about, that's what this area was known as, Kingsbridge. Before there was a neighborhood called Riverdale, before there was a Spuyten Duyvil neighborhood, the whole general area was called Kingsbridge, including northern Manhattan.
I'm just so tempted to ask you this because I've never really asked you this. What led you to a point where you became a historian and in particular the president of the Kingsbridge Historical Society? What in your life, what possessed you to go that far and dedicate your professional life to it?
Well, I was living and working in the neighborhood as a city's public school teacher. And, just living here and walking around the streets, I got curious, where did this name Kingsbridge come from? And it turns out it comes from a literal bridge, the King's Bridge, which was the first bridge to Manhattan Island, built in 1693.
Is that the one that we know now as the 225th Street Bridge?
It was in a different place. So the King's Bridge is, it's actually still under the street. When they filled in the Spuyten Duyvil Creek, they buried the bridge under the street. And that'd be West 230th Street and Kingsbridge Avenue.
Wow. I had no idea. You've already educated us. I really appreciate that. So you were just fascinated by that. And then, of course, one thing led to the...
one thing led to the other. And then, this neighborhood, Spuyten Duyvil, Kingsbridge, Riverdale, it's very hilly. There are parts of the Bronx that are relatively flat topography, but this is very hilly. So, when you start reading about events in history, those hills played a role in how history played out in this neighborhood. And unlike places like in Manhattan or other parts of the Bronx where, there's these tall buildings and you kind of don't have a historical perspective of where you are, you really do have that perspective here. And of course, being close to the Hudson River and the Palisades.
Wow. So you mentioned that we're going to talk about the American Revolution. Now you can do the math. You are doing the 250th anniversary of the 1775 American Revolution. What are we doing? What's happening?
Well, there's a lot happening. First and foremost, we're having a large exhibit here, right here in this building, our headquarters. And there's just going to be a lot here for people to see. We're going to have objects, artifacts brought together from places like the Dykeman Farmhouse Museum, the Van Cortlandt House Museum, from our own collection, from private collections. We're going to have new art that was commissioned by a Bronx artist, Gary Axelbank, on display, depicting people and events of the American Revolution.
Wow.
And we're going to have this really killer digital map display that I think people are really going to love. And in addition,
excuse me, let me just
yeah,
interject. So for that map display, people will say, "Oh, that's where I live now," and then see that something major happened.
exactly. And it'll be interactive. People will get to control it themselves, this
You,
map.
I recall, and your friend and mine, Peter Ostrander, once we were doing a thing in Van Cortlandt Park, and he showed me the road that George Washington actually rode down when they, came into New York City. That's kind of incredible, and that you can walk down there, and of course, it's a beautiful path in Van Cortlandt Park, and have no idea.
Oh, totally. I mean, the Bronx, during the American Revolution, these were the most dramatic years in the history of the Bronx. I mean, this
Wow.
was an active war zone. Washington was here, the British were here. And it's, part of what we're trying to do with this exhibit is talk about that, talk about the battles, but also talk about how local people, Bronx residents of the time, were affected by living in that war zone.
Well, Fort Independence, of course, comes up, and that didn't come out of nowhere. Let's show some pictures. Our producer Anderson's got some photos that you sent, and you're going to, and these are places that I recognized. Here's, let's see, 238th Street and what avenue is that? Waldo Avenue. Why is this more significant than just Goodfellas Pizza?
Well, about 250 years ago, where that Goodfellas Pizza is, there was a George Washington called a council of war, bringing together all of his generals at a meeting right there on that.
In that spot.
Yes.
Wow.
He was concerned that the British were going to outflank his army. They were landing troops at Throg's Neck to try to trap Washington in Manhattan. And so at this council of war, Washington and his generals were responding to that and deciding, well, we have to be ready to retreat out of New York City if that happens.
Wow, that exact spot is where that's just, it is mind blowing. All right, let's go. Let's keep going. We got more to look at. Okay, so this I know is 230th Street and Broadway.
Yes, the Dunkin'
And I'm guessing that Dunkin' and Baskin Robbins was not there 250 years ago.
No, but a very similar establishment was. It was the local tavern. And it turns out that the tavern keeper that ran the tavern, he was a British secret agent. And so
so he was like actually infiltrating.
Well, he was working for the British. So you may have seen this iconic painting of the Patriot soldiers tearing down the statue of King George III.
I have not seen that, but okay.
Well, anyway, they tore down this statue of King George III, these Patriot soldiers. They chopped off the head, and they had this plan of sticking the head up on a pole to sort of mock the king.
The head of the statue.
Yes.
Okay.
And so this tavern keeper was sent on a secret mission to infiltrate the rebel camp, steal that king's head back, and keep it safe for the British so that the king's, the head of the statue wouldn't be defaced. And so he actually buried that king's head, we believe, near his tavern right there. Could have been in the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot for a while.
Well, I don't know that I'm going to go back in that Dunkin'. I'm going to get Dunkin' somewhere else, because going in there, I don't want.
John Adams stayed at that tavern.
Wow. Who became the president?
About his stay in that tavern, how Kingsbridge was just such a beautiful place.
Wow, that is amazing. What do we got? We got one or two more, right? Okay, so people will know this is Piper's Kilt, popular nighttime establishment in the Bronx on, 231st Street and Albany Crescent.
Yeah, so, I mean, my wife and I, we were living on Bailey Avenue for years around the corner, loved the Piper's Kilt, the burgers there, the onion rings, and only later did I realize that that's sitting at a very historic intersection. So Albany Crescent and 231st Street, that's where the Boston Post Road and the Albany Post Road came together, just before those roads crossed the Kingsbridge onto Manhattan Island. And so during the Revolution, Paul Revere rode right through that intersection 6 times to bring news from Boston to the Patriots in New York City.
Well, now, Paul Revere, the actual Paul Revere.
The Paul Revere, yes.
Wow, and he rode on a horse, presumably, yes, of course.
In our exhibit, we actually have an invoice that he submitted. He changed his horse at Kingsbridge, and he rode 234 miles he's billing the Continental Congress for his journey.
I'd be curious to know. So, did he do that? Was there American dollars, or what was it? British?
They were still using the pounds at
the
that
pounds.
point.
Yeah, I would figure that. Wow, that's crazy. All right, he said we got two more. These are just fascinating, Nick. Thank you so much.
Okay, so this is a square from a quilt.
Oh yes, right.
So in 1976, so the last time we really commemorated the establishment of the United States in a major way, local women here in Riverdale.
And I think we have a picture of Anderson. If we could show the larger picture there of the quilts. Okay, go ahead.
So local women got together in a quilting bee and sewed that quilt you see there on the right. There's 3 quilts in that picture. And, they depicted all sorts of historical scenes in the Bronx, famous people, patriotic imagery, but also local landmarks, such as the one we just saw, which was the Henry Hudson Bridge. And the getting together and sewing this quilt was so popular that 2 more quilts were made shortly thereafter. So one of those quilts is owned by the Van Cortlandt House Museum. We have one of the quilts, and another quilt was sewn by Riverdale Senior Services.
And how long ago were these put together?
So they were all sewn in 1976 and in the years that followed.
So it's still 50 years ago.
That's 50 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. And so these 3 quilts are now together for the first time on display at Van Cortlandt House Museum, and we're bringing them into our exhibit later.
So let's see. So we've got June 8th at the Kingsbridge Historical Society, which the address you can throw out to us, Nick. That'd be great.
That's 2570 Independence Avenue.
Right. And then that exhibit will be in there for this for a period of time.
Yeah. So
time, of course, is the big question. But go ahead.
Yeah. So that's our grand opening on June 8th, and it'll be open every weekend in June after that, and Mondays and Tuesdays.
Stephanie, we didn't forget about you. We wanted to focus on this. We got about a minute. Why are you and what you do with as an administrator of those Facebook pages, etc., why are you so interested in this history, and why are you a board member of the Kingsbridge Historical Society?
Okay, I wasn't sure whether you were addressing that to
you. Go ahead.
Well, I live across the street from Edgehill, and I used to attend services here when it was a church. I was a history major at Fordham. I was actually their first women's studies major. Graduated in 1983. I've been in the Bronx since 1979. I come from, my father was a huge American history fanatic. I spent my entire childhood being dragged from battlefield to battlefield. Most of those battlefields were in the South.
And you survived. Well, listen, we got to take a break. But so that was the germ that I wanted. So your father was a big historian, and that inspired you to get involved and to perpetuate the notion of history, right? I got that? All right. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, Stephanie will be up, and she's got a very interesting bit of preservation we want to address. So we're on the Bronx Buzz, and we'll be right back.
19.7% of Bronxites currently experience food insecurity. Meanwhile, instead of these nice, colorful foods, this is the best food that they have access to. If this sounds like you, there are a bunch of resources to get healthy food for free or cheap. If you want to help, you might consider donating or volunteering in one of these places. Community fridges like this one are all over the city and allow New Yorkers to conveniently donate extra food to people who might need it. Go to this link and find your nearest one. Food banks and pop-up events like these provide millions of healthy meals to families in need. These organizations are distributing meals to Bronxites as we speak, and are always accepting donations and volunteers.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. We're doing a little bit of history here, Bronx history, Kingsbridge history, and our guests are Nick Dembowski of the Kingsbridge Historical Society. He's the president, and board member Stephanie Coggins. Stephanie, you've been involved in this whole notion of the Church of the Mediator. This is an historic building, an historic facility on 231st Street in the West Bronx. What is happening to it that is of concern to you?
Well, just 2 months ago, it was placed on the Preservation League of New York State's list of 7 to save, which is a very prestigious list of historical landmarks in the state of New York that are, 1, worthy of saving, and 2, in imminent danger of being lost. So right now,
let me ask you about it. So the part of the issue is it's antique, it's old, and there are real structural problems, interior problems. I mean, it's not like they're just saying let's just take it down. It's hard to preserve this facility.
all right. Well, the congregation of the Church of the Mediator goes back to 1855. The structure at 231st and Kingsbridge was actually started in 1901, finished in 1911, and consecrated in 1927.
Okay.
But it is considered to be one of our finest churches in the Bronx, certainly, and in New York City also. It's called the Little Cathedral of the Bronx. The property was actually donated by a very wealthy landowner who lived here in Spuyten Duyvil, James S. Douglas. He was one of the wealthiest men in the world at one time. And there are still remnants of his presence there. The problem is that at one time, this church was filled with parishioners, was always a very active congregation until probably the last 25 years, when the area of Kingsbridge became more of a low-income area, and fewer and fewer people in general go to church, any
Religious institution.
any religious institution, and that is certainly the case there. I started going to the Church of the Mediator because they were always having these lovely events at Christmas time, which I knew about because of my Facebook group. And I realized how fragile this congregation was.
Well, so is this a matter of the congregation not utilizing the facility, or also a problem because the facility is deteriorating? I mean,
It's both. But the congregation does utilize the facility. I think I'm making this judgment based as an outsider, but I think that they've made some bad financial decisions over the years as to how to keep the congregation going and the church maintained. And that is a problem now. But they do have the means and the ability to keep this church going. It's just a matter of will.
Is this the Archdiocese of New York City?
It's the Episcopal Archdiocese.
The Episcopal, because it's an Episcopal church.
And the Episcopal Archdiocese of New York would like to demolish the building.
Wow.
It's
by the way,
we just got a mail delivery, so that is the problem. But so an individual named Stephen Burns, who is the president of the Untermeyer Gardens Conservancy, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which also was completely, down to the tax at one time, but is now a place that is celebrated and beloved in
And
the
so
area.
Stephanie, you bring him up because you think that that they
Well, he's the
can assist.
individual. He is the individual who applied for who nominated the church to be one of the 7 to save.
Now, as I understand, it's $20 million to really get the thing going, but it is a complicated problem, as you established. You want to preserve it, but you may not have the congregation to continue to support it. That becomes, I understand the balance, and certainly we as a society would not want to lose a facility like this. Anderson, you can show some. We have some of the photographs of it. We can show some of those. To lose a facility of this spectacular, images and everything that's in there would be, really, really, really sad.
Yeah, that's a Tiffany window. It's actually paid for by James Douglas.
Okay. But the whole idea is to try and preserve it. How do you see a solution here when we've got a facility that could cost some money, but it becomes hard to justify it if you don't have the congregation to support it?
Well, there are a number.
Do I have that right?
Yeah. There are a number of concerned Bronxites who are involved in this process, and we're trying to guide the congregation through it, both to create an infrastructure and a means for them to maintain the building, have funds to continue into the next millennial, and also bring more people through the doors to attend the church.
Nick, I just want to bring you into the conversation, given your experience on these kinds of things. What's your thought about it? I mean, we could show more pictures. There's plenty to look at that is absolutely irreplaceable. So you want to keep it, but I understand the balance of saying, well, if you're going to keep it, for fewer parishioners, that doesn't kind of work. What's your thought about all that?
Well, I mean, first of all, I just want to reiterate that this is just an incredibly gorgeous building, and it harkens back to the day when literally Tibbetts Brook used to flow behind this building. So it's really witnessed the neighborhood transition from relative countryside to the urban environment that we have in Kingsbridge today. So, I mean, historically, it's important. Aesthetically, architecturally, it's very important. And, maybe we're at a point in time where the congregation's smaller than it once was, but, sometimes you have to preserve something that's beautiful and important for the future, not just for what's going on right now. Think about all the wonderful landmarks people lament the loss of in New York City, the old Penn Station,
Right.
Maybe it made sense at that moment to do what they were doing, but you're robbing future generations by tearing something like this down.
So let me offer just me without any expertise, but just say, well, what if we preserve the building? Whatever, come up with the funds to deal with that, but then use it for something else in addition to being a church. We could think of the needs. Go ahead, Stephanie. You want to weigh in?
Well, that is indeed the case. I mean, the church owns the building. Okay, the diocese problem is that the diocese has been underwriting some of the costs, so the congregation owes the diocese money, but the church owns the building and the property around it, and there's actually it's actually a decent size in between on the left side of the building, right next to where the Spite and Dival daycare is, which was also built by James Douglas, or underwritten. Is a piece of land that could be sold, and housing could be put
and you used for something else, and maybe something like that could pay for the stability of the church.
And then there are things that they can do and are currently doing, like opening up the sanctuary to to other churches for their worship. There's actually a Presbyterian church that's actually based in Kingsbridge. I don't know why they lost their own church, but they're currently doing services, and they are providing the congregation with income, and a fairly healthy income.
Wow.
And then there's a lot of, you just have to be creative. Think about, I mean, I'm always getting these, candlelight concert ads. Can you imagine how beautiful it would be to have a classical concert or a choir in there? I mean, and to be honest with you,
you're
the fact
speaking
that
my language. That's exactly the kind of thing I was thinking about.
the fact that it's a little bit, worse for the wear, actually, I think adds to the patina. And one thing that I'd like to say is, before Edge Hill was the Kingsbridge Historical Society, it was a church. And I was raised Catholic. I went to Fordham. But I realized that if I didn't come over here and attend the services, that hardly anyone was going to be here. And there were more days where it was me and between 3 and 5 people attending services than there were not.
Wow.
But now Edge Hill is a community
resource,
a community treasure.
So before we run out of time now, let's see. The New York Landmarks Conservancy will be hosting its 15th annual Sacred Sites Open House on May 17th and 18th. And to me, it sounds like it's doable. Will the Archdiocese listen to these kinds of inputs, or is that still part of
We're working it out. I would like to say think about the sacred site before we run out of time.
Go ahead.
Stephen Burns, who is a very renowned architect, is going to be giving 2 tours of the interior. The inside of the Church of the Meteor is very rarely open to the public. It's usually just used as a church. So this is your opportunity to get in and learn something about the treasures inside that you've been wondering about.
Stephanie, we do got to run. For both Nick Dembowski from the Kingsbridge Historical Society, thank you for your passion and for your work. And Stephanie, thank you especially for your passion and for fighting for this. I think it's very worthy. I think we can turn that thing into something that is good for everybody and also maintain the congregation. That's what my summary is from what I heard.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thanks for
folks, that will do it for the Bronx Buzz. We will see you next week. You know what we always say, if the creek don't rise and the curtain don't fall, we'll be back next week. Good night.